In 1864, Northern Virginia was a region of small and scattered communities set amid gently rolling hills. It was an ideal area for cavalry operations, and Colonel John S. Mosby's horsemen so dominated activities in the area that it was often called Mosby's Confederacy. Mosby was everywhere. He destroyed railway tracks. He robbed sutlers and Union paymasters. He captured pickets and shot down stragglers. Mosby, with a price on his head, crossed Long Bridge into Washington City in the full light of day. In Washington he hobnobbed with Union officers at the bar of the Willard Hotel, and returned unharmed to Virginia. On one occasion Mosby stopped ladies on their way to Washington and sent a lock of his hair to President Lincoln, accompanied by a note expressing regret that he could not deliver it himself. And now the time had come. It had been a bruising spring for Abraham Lincoln, and he looked forward to spending time at the presidential summer retreat, the Old Soldiers' Home, a 34-room Gothic revival cottage 3 miles from the White House. Lincoln loved to roam the grounds alone. His aides saw this as dangerous recklessness. Lincoln told Francis B. Carpenter, "I do not see what the rebels would gain by killing or getting possession of me. I am but a single individual, and it would not help their cause or make the least difference in the progress of the war. Everything would go right on just the same." In the misty moonlight, Abraham Lincoln fancied that he saw a man dodging behind one of the trees. That night, in deference to his wife's anxious appeals, he had provided himself with a thick oak stick for protection. As he walked on, he heard the unmistakable click of a Colt 6-shooter. A figure emerged from behind a tree. "Mr. Lincoln, you will accompany us," said John Singleton Mosby. Lincoln was placed in the charge of Lewis Powell, who had served under Mosby for almost a year, earning the nickname Louis the Terrible, for his murderous ferocity. Powell bound the president's hands, gagged him, and then set about scraping off Lincoln's too readily identifiable beard with a very sharp, Bowie knife. When Powell was finished, Lincoln looked a weedy Midwestern farmer with a bad haircut and a patchy shave. And so John S. Mosby, Lewis Powell, and the President of the United States made their way into Maryland, heading south, sheltering in a series of safe houses, rowing across the Potomac River, and then riding once again, until they were securely behind Confederate lines. It was late in Richmond, and Jefferson Davis, in his second-floor study in the Executive Mansion, was working through a massive pile of papers. Davis looked up and caught the light reflecting off one of the prisms of the chandelier. Noise of horses outside. Feet running up the stairs. The door burst open. Davis looked up from his papers more angry than alarmed. "President Davis," said Colonel Mosby, "I have the honor to present to you Mr. Abraham Lincoln of Illinois." The speechless Davis stared at the gaunt, rumpled figure, before a smile of grim satisfaction stole across his face. "Please sit, sir, we are glad to have you here." The problem presented before the Confederate cabinet and invited guests was a difficult one. What to do with the prisoner, Abraham Lincoln? "If I may, Mr. President," said Judah P. Benjamin, Secretary of the Treasury, "the longer we hold Mr. Lincoln, the longer we control the political destiny of the North. If we return Mr. Lincoln, he will be hailed as a hero. He may even then win the upcoming election. He will then continue the war. Tens of thousands will die and the outcome will be uncertain. But, if we hold him, while negotiating, with certain delays, until after the election, then we may hope that the election will bring the peace party to power. If General McClellan comes to power, we may expect a speedy and favorable end to the war. If General McClellan loses the election, then we can exchange the newly re-elected president for our hostage soldiers." On November 8, 1864, the United States of America went to the polls. George B. McClellan, the former commander of the Army of the Potomac, the candidate of the Democratic Party, won 212 electoral votes and 2.2 million popular votes. Andrew Johnson, Abraham Lincoln's choice for vice president, who became the candidate of the National Union Party due to the temporary incapacity of the party's nominee, Abraham Lincoln, received 21 electoral votes and 1.8 million popular votes. George B. McClellan had won the election in a landslide, which was not surprising, considering that the armies were, yet again, bogged down and far from victory, and that his discredited predecessor Lincoln was rotting in a Confederate prison. McClellan had received a mandate, and he knew what he had a mandate to do. Make peace. The long national nightmare was to be brought to an end.